Welcome back to College Football Addiction. I've got Nick Farabaugh on to chat about one of the bigger games in the ACC, not just this weekend, but this year. A couple of undefeated in-conference teams going at it with Pitt and SMU. Nick, how you doing, bud?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you taking a few minutes and chatting with us. What is before we get deep into the game right now, what is the mood up there around Pitt football? You know, it's got to be, I don't know, sky high. I can't imagine it's anything but just glee right now.
It is. I mean, listen, it's a historical season for them so far. First time since 1982, they're 7-0. It feels there's buzz around campus. There's buzz around the city. You know, in Pittsburgh, you got to compete for attention because the Steelers are a thing, and the Steelers are 6-2, obviously, so they take up a lot of the airwaves. But the fact that Pitt football has even cut through that and is now creating buzz around the city, yeah, there's palpable buzz, and especially this week, you hear it. It's all over the radio, and that's something that definitely is good for Pitt, obviously. And yeah, you feel the buzz for where they are.
It almost feels like, and I've done some, just to catch you up, I've done some videos on the possible three-way tiebreaker at the top of the ACC, or three-way tie at the top of the ACC, which could happen with SMU and Clemson and Miami. Now Pitt could obviously disturb that. And every time I do that, Pitt fans are, man, where's the love for Pitt? And I usually say, like, well, look, they can ruin that, but they can't be part of the three-way tie because they played two of the teams. So someone has to lose those games. So I kind of get the sense from Pitt fans at times, there's almost like from the national level, because it's even directed at me some, there's almost like is there a disrespected feeling? Like, hey, we're 7-0 and we're not ranked as high as some of these other undefeated teams that weren't expected to be as good. Like, people aren't talking to us. We're an underdog, to SMU this week, and I know it's on the road and they only have one loss, but we may be an underdog to Clemson at home. Like, what is there a disrespect mantra that people feel?
Absolutely, 100%. I you hear all the time the rankings. They're only 18. People thought they would be top 15 after being Syracuse and thrashing Syracuse like they did, and they didn't. And so everybody's throwing the disrespect card around, and it's definitely it's something that I don't think only the fans feel. I think Narduzzi is using that in the locker room to try and kind of make these guys play a little angrier too. He'll say publicly, rankings don't matter. Trust me, I know Narduzzi. This guy is using anything he can to look at the bulletin board material thing, and his players respond to it. So, yeah, I think there is, and it's interesting, right? Kind of the way they got there. They beat two Power Four teams in their non-conference. Barely, right? Both were comebacks that they had to pull off. Both West Virginia and Cincinnati were crazy comebacks. They had a few crazy wins in there, and I think that kind of factors into it, right? The Cal win being, on a missed field goal, they win by 2 at home. Some of these wins have been crazy for them, and so Pitt 7-0 here, but they kind of feel like they are disrespected. It feels like 2021 kind of too. When Pitt won the ACC championship, even that year when Pickett and Addison and everything were going crazy, you look back at that year when Pitt was, only had one loss to Western Michigan. A lot of people still weren't buying into them as ACC championship contenders. Jordan Addison wasn't even on, watch list for the Blitnikoff. No one was talking about Pickett as a Heisman contender. Obviously, all of those ended up coming to fruition. So it kind of feels like 2021 in some ways, where you're not getting the same respect.
When I think about just really the city of Pittsburgh, the kind of coach that Narduzzi is, just very physical, tough. Like Pittsburgh's got that mantra, just like as a city, like a region, that part of Pennsylvania. And then also, like, that's the way that Narduzzi coaches. That's the way that his teams coach. And you mentioned, like, him privately, not publicly, kind of using that underdog mentality. Like, I just think that fits, like, so I feel like I'm describing a Disney movie. Like, it just fits, like, so well, just, like all of those things together. I think about, you mentioned 2021. I think about when Kirby Smart was able to convince his kids that the most talented team of all time, that somehow they were disrespected and underdogs, and nobody believed in them. And we all just kind of roll our eyes at that. Like, they're winning the national championship, saying, like, nobody believed us. But I do think, like, it works for Pitt here. Like, and it also just kind of like fits who they are. And so I love that you said that. I love that you brought that up, because I was kind of thinking the same thing. Like, yeah, it's very much like it just fits Pittsburgh, and that just kind of that underdog, like, will prove it to you mentality. And so, yeah, I mean, if I'm him and I'm not using that, I start using it immediately. But like you said, I'm sure he is. You mentioned that Syracuse game, 3 defensive touchdowns in the game. Absolutely, just I think people thought like Kyle McCord, which he's still fine. Like this isn't like a massive shot at him or anything, but thought that he was one of the better quarterbacks in the conference, and he had played really well at certain times in the year. And I think a lot of people were looking forward to that game. And Pitt's defense kind of made it a snoozer pretty early, where unless you were a Pitt fan, the game just wasn't very exciting. And it was like, all right, let's see what the NFL game looks like tonight. But certainly something that you look at. Man, can they carry that over against a team that just had 6 turnovers of their own on the road at Duke? I don't know that I expect there to be a crazy amount of turnovers, but it feels like an opportunity for Pitt to go and upset a team that has some of those same issues.
It's interesting because Pitt's defense has been doing that a lot more recently. This was the concern, actually, kind of going into, in my opinion, the conference schedule was the defense, and then you look at what they've done since North Carolina, and it's been really solid for them. And I think that's an interesting part. You talk about 6 turnovers for SMU. They weren't really a team going into that game that felt like highly turnover worthy. But then again, McCord hadn't thrown many picks either going into this one. And Pitt plays aggressive defensively. They blitz a ton, and they their linebackers are called the Sharks, and they're super athletic and they fly sideline to sideline, and they're playmakers at the second level. If you're not, careful about their linebackers, that's really where Pitt makes their hay. They don't have a dominant defensive line like they've had in the past. Like in 21, they had that dominant defensive line with Kalijah Cansey and, a first round pick there. And this year they don't really have that. They have a solid defensive line. It's gotten better, but those linebackers are kind of the straw that stirs the drink, if you will. And their secondary is also young, but getting better. They have 2 veteran safeties, and Javon McIntyre and Donovan McMillan, who are ball hawks too. But those linebackers are really what's doing it. And so I'm interested to see how this works because, SMU works tempo. They got a good run game. Kevin Jennings is playing really well as well, although he, had the down game last week. He's been improving throughout the season. So it'll be interesting to see. But you got to be always on the lookout for Pitt's linebackers because if you're not, that's where you'll get into trouble. Kyle Lewis, Rasheem Biles, Brandon George, and Braylon Lovelace have played really high-level football and are causing havoc for quarterbacks on the back end.
Yeah, I almost wonder if you're Pitt, if you wish that he wouldn't have had that really bad performance last week, so that like he doesn't have like the typical bounce back game. Like couldn't you have had that really bad performance when we come to town? Although they have played much better at home, I will give SMU that. I was going to ask about Jennings next. Like nobody is necessarily like super well equipped to slow down or stop a mobile quarterback. Like it is literally just a numbers game. But do you think Pitt spies a little bit there? Like how aggressive do you think they are with pressures? Like, because Jennings is, mobile enough to make some things happen with his legs. How well prepared, or how do you think Pitt plays that?
They blitz and blitz a lot. Pitt's going to blitz. It's just in their identity. I mean, Pat Narduzzi essentially has to blitz a lot more this year too. Because again, I talked about that D line, how they're not super dominant, and they just don't win one-on-one rushing forward a ton. So they've had to blitz more, and their linebackers are really good at it. So they're going to blitz a lot. It doesn't matter how mobile the quarterback is. I think, and Jennings also, coming in, I know that he was questionable. He has that knee injury, so maybe that affects things a little bit too. But we'll see. I think Jennings is a guy that could hurt them with his legs. Pitt this year hasn't been hurt by a quarterback with their legs yet. They've done a really good job of keeping those guys in the pocket. I don't think they faced a quarterback quite as mobile as Jennings either. There's not an elite rusher that has been on their schedule yet. Garrett Green can move a little bit for West Virginia, but they kept him in the pocket for the most part. But Jennings is a little more mobile, and he'll be able to probably extend the play and create things out of structure. Something you saw against Cal, Fernando Mendoza was able to do a little bit. But I do think Pitt is going to have to worry more about what happens when Jennings is in the pocket. And the reason I say that is because Jennings throws a really nice deep ball. And that's Pitt's weakness and always has been because Narduzzi plays that cover zero quarters where you're on an island, right? It's the classic Narduzzi stuff. So you leave yourself open to those fade balls. That's why Narduzzi defenses have always struggled against, teams that have had really good quarterbacks. Like look what he has done against guys like Trevor Lawrence and Drake May and Quarterbacks that have gone into the NFL that have been really good players have been able to beat them because they're able to make those high percentage throws. I think Jennings has shown the ability to make those throws. And, even Rhett Lashlee offenses in the past when he was at Miami have scored, I think, 38 and 31 points on Narduzzi defenses and good Narduzzi defenses. And so we'll see what ends up happening. But I think Jennings himself is probably going to be more dangerous with his arm than his legs in this one, just because I think that's where Narduzzi's defenses are really susceptible to being hit with the big play.
If you had to name an X factor and you want to do one on both sides of the ball, that's fine. For Pitt, who would you kind of look at this week? Who's had a really good game if they're able to go in and pull off the upset?
Yeah, I think defensively, I talked about those linebackers, and I think their X factor linebacker has always been Rasheem Biles. I think to me, uh, Kyle Lewis is having the All ACC type of year, but Biles is kind of the explosive weapon. He's kind of half safety, half linebacker, and he is a ball hawk. He's probably their best blitzer. He's going to make an impact, put you behind the chains, make TFLs. He is like a slot corner and will be manned up in the slot at times. He's a really unique player. There's not many players like Rasheem Biles, which I think makes him a unique game planning tool on both sides of the ball, I guess, if you're SMU too. So I think he's the guy that will be the X factor. I think offensively, I always say he's the X factor just because I feel like, they rely on him a lot. But I feel like if this offense is clicking again, because Pitt's offense has sputtered a little bit. It's largely tied to Eli Holstein, but I think Des Reed is going to be, the X factor for Pitt offensively. When they have been great offensively, Des Reed has caught touchdowns out of the backfield. Eli has found him underneath. The run game maybe hasn't been consistent, and they've kind of taken away some of the explosives that he has hit early in the season. So I think if they win this game offensively, put up a lot of points, it's almost going to be tied to Reed because he can do so much. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He can pass protect. He's a great runner. And when he gets in the open field, you're not catching him. He's real fast, and he's gone. He has had a really impressive season coming up from Western Carolina. So those are the two guys I feel like, if you look at their success for Pitt this year, where have they had success? Those two guys are almost always somehow woven into the story.
So right now, SMU a little over a touchdown favorite. I think I looked this morning; it was like 7.5, based on kind of what book or what line you're looking at. Do you have a prediction in this one? Do you think they can go in and pull the upset? What do you think happens here on Saturday?
I wouldn't be shocked if they go in and win. I think this Pitt team's good, but I do think Eli Holstein's struggles over the past few weeks are concerning for Pitt in this one. He's become more erratic with the football. He's kind of hunting the big play, throwing picks. He hasn't thrown as many picks. He's only thrown 5 this year, but probably should have thrown more in the last 2 games. And he struggled big time against Syracuse. That was something that kind of went under the radar, I feel like. He was not good in that game, but they didn't need him, obviously, to be. And that's why the Cal game was close, too. If he comes back to where he was before that, UNC game before, I think Pitt has a really good shot to pull this off. Because their defense is going to give up points because I think that's matchup for the offense is better than it's the matchup for the defense. But I do think, this is kind of a classic game to me where Pitt loses close, covers, but, something like 38-35, just something like that. Like, that makes a lot of sense to me. I think Pitt will find their footing offensively because I believe in Cade Bell and Eli Holstein as a duo. I think they're really good. But I also think in the past, Rhett Lashlee has been able to really kind of know where the bones are buried in this Narduzzi Narduzzi's defense. And so I kind of lean SMU here because I think they have the ingredients offensively to really attack this Narduzzi scheme. And when you're talking scheme, Narduzzi is just so much more important than a lot of coaches just because of how he plays football, where you have a lot of man coverage on the outside.
Nick, I appreciate you for spending some time with us chatting SMU and Pitt. Where can people follow you? Where can they find more of your work?
Yeah. You can follow me at Nick_Farabaugh. Make sure to check that out. Pitt stuff there, be at PennLive.com, and check out all of that Pitt stuff at that point.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy.